Minister, on behalf of Fitch Ratings, thank you for your time today. Our viewers are eager to hear about your thoughts on the Malaysian economy, the politics, and the road ahead. So with that, let me begin, if I could, by asking you, in May, it will mark 2 years that this coalition government, led by Prime Minister Mahathir, and you as Minister of Finance, have been in office. How would you assess your performance so far, say on a scale of 1 to 10?
Never like to rate myself, but I would like to look at the benchmarks or criteria set not just only by the local business community, but also by the foreign investors. And of course, the international rating agencies like Fitch. Of course, I think one of the principal achievements is our success in retaining our international credit ratings, despite facing the huge fiscal challenges. That has also helped to maintain investors' confidence. And if you look at the state of the economy, we feel that Malaysia's economy is still strong. Our fiscal consolidation plan over 3 years is still going well, and everything is on track and on schedule. And we believe that we should be emerging stronger next year when the fiscal consolidation plan is completed. So by 2021, I think Malaysia, or the end of 2021, Malaysia should be back on track. Okay. And you can see signs of that consolidation or that rehabilitation and revival happening. Okay. So green shoots are emerging, and that's why we are very confident that this year the economy for Malaysia will be better than last year.
Okay, so I'd like to come back to the budget policies that you alluded to, but let's begin with the macro outlook. And we've come from a tough external environment with the pressures of all the policy uncertainty and the US-China trade war, and exports around the region have been down, and in some countries very negative. You have a very diversified export base, both commodities and electronics. How do you assess macro performance into 2020, and what's the outlook for exports now that there's some respite in the trade war?
Well, if you look at the macro outlook, I still feel that our economic growth should grow sustainably, slightly better than last year. No, Malaysia is still dependent on global trade, and global trade last year was abysmal at around 1 to 1.2%. Next year, I think the World Bank estimating global trade to grow up to 3%, or even higher at 3.2%. And that's good for Malaysia as a trading nation. Of course, economic growth rate would also grow better than last year. So there's no reason for us to perform worse than last year. At the same time, with the improved fiscal outlook, we have, of course, the ability to undertake the necessary infrastructure projects. When I first took over as finance minister, at times I was firefighting. At the same time, trying to determine the extent of our finances. But after 1 year, we know the state of our finances, and we are able to contain them. At the same time, we are able to undertake and carry out the necessary programs that can not only address the future growth, but also the social concerns, the necessity to address the needs of those who are poorer off, those who need assistance, and also grow the economy at the same time.
Right.
So I think probably the 2019 budget was more of a year of fiscal consolidation and rationalization.
Okay.
Whereas 2020 budget was more in terms of, as what you mentioned just now, a more macro outlook on how we can grow the economy sustainably. So this year's budget, because knowing what we are able to spend, and that there will be no nasty surprises in store for us, unlike last year. You couldn't carry out certain programs because we don't know what would haunt us or what landmines would explode in our face. But this year, we knew our exact state of affairs. So we have actually introduced a 50.3 billion ringgit budget over 5 years, where we are spending heavily on digitalization, putting in the physical hardware for broadband, including 5G, 21.6 billion ringgit for the National Fiberization Connectivity Plan, 28.7 billion in incentives, grants, and tax breaks to encourage businesses not only to digitalize, not only to be part of the digital economy, but more importantly to be export giants if possible.
Okay.
There's no point for companies to be local champions. We must also be part of the export and global trade.
Right. So thinking about that, you live in a region with lots of good and sound economies, the likes of Thailand, Singapore, Vietnam, Indonesia. How would you like to position the Malaysian economy from a competitiveness angle to say, hey, investors, come here?
Well, I think for one, we want to demonstrate that we have a stable political system that is transparent, clean, and also gives guarantees to investors because we have a reliable system and also adhere to rule of law. I think that's very important for investors. We will not guarantee that there will be no problems, but we can guarantee that we will resolve these issues together with foreign investors.
Okay.
And if you look at our investment numbers, they have actually grown up. They actually grown encouragingly, especially for manufacturing investments. They have actually doubled over the previous years, and I think this augurs well for the future. What we need to prep up is, of course, domestic investment. But that is again due to external factors, because the global trade war has affected local investors' confidence. They do not know what they should invest. I think last year's abysmal trade growth of 1.2%, I think really caused many businesses to scale down investments. But this year, we can see prospects rising. Whether it's PMI or IPI, all the numbers have been positive.
Right, and we see that around the region picking up.
Yes,
So.
and at the same time, we have also gotten a grip with the government machinery. Last year, unfortunately, some of our development projects didn't take off because of some bureaucratic problems. But we have resolved them. Unfortunately, some development expenditure that was earmarked for last year, supposed to be spent last year, didn't take off, but they will be expanded this year. We are making sure that what we announced planned in 2020 will be implemented and spent this year, not the following year. So what you see now is a double boost. 2019 budget development projects will be only spent this year, but 2020 development projects will also be spent this year. So you have both budgets going at the same time. So we feel that prospects should be better.
Right. Now, when you announced the 2020 budget, you relaxed your deficit target marginally relative to previous expectations of 3%. Now you're aiming for a deficit of 3.2%. So it's a bit of a boost to the economy, yet retaining emphasis on fiscal consolidation over the medium term. As a rating agency, we focus on the fiscal position. Malaysia stands out among its A-rated peers because of a high public debt burden. So could you tell us how you're balancing this? And one of the surprises when the new government came into office was the scrapping of the GST. It opens a bit of a hole over the medium term, and we're very eager to know how you plan to fill that gap over the medium term.
Well, if you look at the replacement of GST was SST, we estimated
the
that
sales and services tax.
Yes, we expect to only collect 22 billion. We did so much better. We collected 27.1 billion, which is 20% more.
So we had forecast
More than 20%
the
more.
removal of the GST with the replacement of the SST would give rise to a 1% of GDP gap over
That's
the
right.
medium term. But you think that gap is now
But
beginning
we
to
thought there
narrow?
would be a 10 billion ringgit gap.
Okay.
But now we have found that that gap can be breached because we got higher collections of SST. At the same time, the savings that we have engineered have also been matched by our expectations. And that doesn't include the sales of government assets. So even without factoring the sales of government assets, we have breached that gap.
Right.
And that's why we could achieve the 3.4%. And we are quite confident
The
of
target
achieving
for 2019.
So last year's
yeah.
target, I can confidently say, even though the numbers have not come in,
Okay.
but I can confidently say that we've achieved the 3.4%
Okay.
fiscal deficit.
Okay.
And this year we intend to also achieve the 3.2%. Now we have to relax that fiscal deficit target in order to engender confidence amongst business community who are actually affected by the trade war. So we want to show that the government is willing to grow the economy without, of course, sacrificing our fiscal consolidation plans, but that we know that economic growth is actually critical, and that we want to let the business community know that we are together with them. So I think despite that relaxation, many analysts feel that economic growth is actually more important. And of course, it's only a 0.2% difference.
Okay.
It's not the end of the
right.
world.
So it balances
Yes,
consolidation
it balances,
with some support for growth. Now, on the revenue side, without the goods and services tax, the GST, are you concerned that you have to rely more on the energy sector, Malaysia being an energy exporter? You relied last year on dividends from Petronas. Is that going to be repeated in future years?
No, actually, the dividend from Petronas was a one-off dividend. That was to pay back the refunds of GST that the previous government did not return. Well, we could say that they held back for their own users and for their own expenditure, which is actually wrong under the law. So what we did was to do the right thing. I think it was imperative for us to return back the taxpayers' money, and we did that. Also to build confidence amongst the business community that this government is not going to steal from them, that this government is going to keep to its promises. And if we look at the contribution of oil revenues from the energy sector, actually it has remained constant at less than 20%. But if you must exclude the one-off Petronas dividend, exclusively used to pay back the GST refunds, which the previous government held back. So we are expecting that the energy sector to continue. I mean, based on the 2020 budget, we projected the contribution to be less than 30%.
Okay, is that
because we
a
have fixed the
target
price,
over
yes.
the medium term to keep the contribution from the energy sector at or below that level?
No, when you look at our revenue, we projected at $62, and also at around 20%, and probably less than 20%. And we expect that contribution to reduce. But of course, if it goes up above $62, that will be a bonus for us. And I think so far, I think oil prices have stayed just slightly above that level.
Does that mean that Malaysia, in a way, is benefiting through the oil price from the escalation in overseas
Petronas
tensions
will
in the Middle
benefit.
East?
Yes, Petronas will benefit. And this would also, as I said, prove to be a bonus. But of course, whether it's sustainable, I think you know it better than me. I think Fitch projected oil prices to be around 60.
62.5.
Oh, you project 62.5. So we are quite close then. We projected, in my budget is based on oil prices at $62 per barrel.
Okay.
So In that sense, I think we are on solid ground.
Right. But oil prices are volatile
Yeah,
now
very, very
with the
volatile. Yes,
international
very volatile.
geopolitical tensions. Now, you
Definitely.
mentioned infrastructure. One of the priorities when you took office was a review of
Yes.
some of the big ticket infrastructure projects, some of them financed by China. Where do we stand on that now?
Well, we managed to claw back around 47 billion ringgit. After we renegotiated and consolidated the infrastructure projects. And that has allowed these projects to be more efficient. At the same time, for us to plan future projects. So this year, we are actually launching almost 120 billion ringgit worth of infrastructure projects. Those which were the so-called mega projects done by the previous government, such as ECRL, the East Coast Rail Link, and new projects undertaken by the present government under the new open tender regime.
Okay.
So I think that is critical because we saved a lot of money, which we could then plow back to do more infra projects.
Okay, so back on track now.
Back on track.
Okay. Now let me, if I may, turn to the politics. A lot of investors ask about the future of the coalition government. Can you tell us your outlook on the politics?
Well, we have held firm for the last 21 months, even though many have said that we will not last that long. But we are committed to serving our full 5-year term, and definitely we would stick together. But of course, politics have now probably become more prominent. Probably because I think the economic numbers have shown to be, even though not spectacular, but reliable. And that many analysts feel comfortable that we will achieve our targets and perhaps exceed their expectations slightly, not very much slightly. So I say that they are quite comfortable with our economic performance, not spectacularly so, but quite comfortable. I'm sure Fitch feels the way. So that's why they are not so sensational compared to the political developments.
Okay.
So, in politics, there's always this background noise. And I think this background noise is unfortunately drawing attention from the fact that Malaysia is doing well reasonably, economically, as well as fiscally. When you look at our monetary sector, no one pays any attention to our monetary sector, even though our banks are well capitalized, strong, low NPLs. The monetary sector is well governed. The fiscal targets are being achieved. Economy is growing sustainably, but somehow it has failed to attract that attention that I think we deserve.
Okay.
Probably because we are all completely attracted by the political going-ons.
Yeah.
And I think that's unfortunate.
Right. So what do you tell investors when they express questions or concerns about policy continuity? If you've expressed confidence that the coalition will serve out the 5-year term, but what do you tell them about this political noise and what it means to the policy outlook? Can you assure them that policy continuity will remain intact?
Definitely. I think if you look at policy pronouncements, especially the economic policy pronouncements so far, it has been characterized by consistency, clarity, and certainty. And that's not easy to achieve for a new government. But we have been consistent, we have clarity, and we have certainty. At the same time, if you look at the actions taken by the government, it shows that we want to ensure stable growth. We want to be business friendly. And we want to continue to be a destination of choice for investors. And also, of course, to grow our tourism industry. That we want to do the right things, get the right policies mix to get Malaysia going again.
Okay.
But again, when you talk about the political situation, the background noise, the media reports, I mean, we have the same problems like US, fake news. Fake news is bedeviling many governments. So unfortunately, we have to spend some time to correct or to dispel this fake news. But the point is that there is stability at the top. The government is working together cohesively and in concert together. The Prime Minister has said many times that it's remarkable that the coalition that was actually worked out only months before the elections can still work in cohesion. I mean, it's quite remarkable that. And that everyone is committed to making this government work. Even after the transition process is executed, I would still tell investors, do not worry about the change of leadership. Look at our policy document, the Pakatan Harapan General Election Manifesto. Now, this is where you judge us. And we are committed to delivering our promises.
Okay.
And so far, I think we have kept to our word without jeopardizing not just the economy, but also, I think, the interests of investors. I think no one has lost out because we implemented our promises or implemented government policies.
Okay. Now, coming back to the issue of governance and business environment, this was another priority that we took notice of when the new government came to office. So while we were concerned about the GST, scrapping of the GST and what implications that had for the budget and revenue, we did take note of initiatives to improve governance and transparency. This was against the scandal with 1MDB, for example. The good news for you is that some of the indicators are showing improvement. On ease of doing business, Malaysia now ranks 12th globally. That's quite an achievement. It's moved up the rankings. Similarly, the governance indicators, the World Bank governance indicators show that Malaysia in the past year has improved more than any other sovereign that we rate. So could you comment, though, what it means concretely? What are some examples and initiatives of improvements in governance and transparency and ease of doing business that you would point to for investors?
We have always placed institutional reforms at the top of our priorities, because we feel very strongly that the people of the country deserves better, and that only with institutional reforms can we ensure that that people can have better lives in the long term, not just in the short term. And that's why when we carry out these reforms, not only by introducing new policies like the open tender, but also passing laws to that effect. I mean, it's just not cutting down the red tape to ensure that it's easier to do business in Malaysia, but it's also about accountability and transparency, that now we declare our assets. And ministers and even members of parliament declare their assets, and that we are not allowed to support any company to get government contracts. Everything is done by open tender. And these are the type of reforms that build confidence in government as an institution that you can trust. You know, I always feel that trust is a very important social capital that can bring about intangible benefits. And by building up that trust, when people believe in government, not only you see the economy grow, but you also see revenue increase. You know, last year, you look at our revenue collection, it increased by nearly 6%. Even though our growth is expected to be around 4.7%. Now, this shows that there's greater confidence that when you feel that the government is not going to steal your money, you'll be more willing to part with your hard-earned money. And I think that is critical to build also confidence amongst the business community and foreign investors.
Okay, so with these reforms, and while there's been improvements in the governance indicators, even still Malaysia lags behind similarly rated peers in the scores that come out. But have you institutionalized these reforms to a point, say, that 1MDB couldn't happen again?
Oh, definitely. Never again. Never, ever again.
Okay.
That we can assure you. And the laws, as I said, the fiscal consolidation plan is over 5 years. And when the final plans are all placed in order by 2021, 1MDB will never have a whiff of a chance to recur again. And also, more importantly, we want to give opportunities to those who have creative ideas, those who have good innovations, to be able to realize their potential. I think that's crucial. If you look at preventing corruption, that's only one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is to be able to generate revenue opportunities for the government, and especially in the new economy, especially in the digital economy. And that's why the 2020 budget emphasizes on digitalization, transiting to the digital economy, as well as getting the people. We have this Malaysians at Work program where we are giving income incentives, wage incentives to workers, so that we can try to lift up their wages, their salaries, to reduce the income inequality, that gap. I think all these measures will help to train up our workforce, especially the younger population, to face this new challenging world of the digital era.
Okay. Now, just let me finish by asking you about Malaysia's place internationally. Malaysia's always been a country that seems to have punched above its weight on the international stage. And in 2020, Malaysia is the host of the APEC. And you have a summit coming up, of the APEC Leaders Summit in November. What does this mean for Malaysia, and how does it tie into the digitalization agenda? Can you tell us what to look for?
I think the APEC summit is very important for Malaysia, principally because three things. Number one, you have the Prime Minister, the oldest elected Prime Minister in the world, chairing his second APEC summit.
1998 was the last time Malaysia
he hosted the first time, and that was the first time we hosted APEC summit. And the second time we host the APEC summit is also by the same Prime Minister. I think that is unique in itself. Secondly, of course, it also allows Malaysia to tell the whole world that we are emerging from being a global kleptocracy to a normal democracy. I think that's good news, because that countries which adhere to rule of law, transparency, accountability, and institutional reforms can still grow and prosper. Because, democracy was seen to be receding, but Malaysia is one bright spot that those that talk about integrity, fighting corruption, can still make it. And thirdly, of course, we want to be a sort of a harbinger of digitalization, new technology, fresh hope of a future for everyone, where we can try to reduce the income inequality gap. And of course, to let not only just APEC, but the whole world see that there are opportunities in Malaysia that they can also join in and benefit.
Okay, now globalization has been under threat in so many countries, and Malaysia has been a bit slow to sign up for the CPTPP, or to ratify it domestically, while other countries have gone ahead. So what are you going to tell leaders when they come about Malaysia's commitment to free trade?
We are committed to free trade as long as it's fair. And I think Malaysia has a small trading nation. We want to be treated fairly. So I think that will be the emphasis that we want to put, that we are committed to international treaties and obligations, but we hope to get a fair deal.
Do you expect the trade agreement to be ratified in Malaysia by then?
I think that is something that we have to look at, because there are still some obstacles that we have to overcome. But before we talk about CPTPP, I think we have to also, we are focusing more on the ASEAN version of the CPTPP. So if we can get that through, I think that will make it easier for CPTPP. But to be frank, I don't think the timeline would allow us to ratify it before APEC.
Okay. Well, Minister, our time is up.
Thank you.
This has been very interesting. And again, on behalf of Fitch, let me thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.